I was desperate. The city bleeds you dry, one soul-crushing apartment viewing at a time. Every place was a closet with a window, listed for the price of a small kingdom. My savings were disappearing, and my parents' couch was starting to feel less like a safety net and more like my permanent address. I'm a junior programmer at a startup that promised to change the world, but mostly just delivered burnout. The promotion I needed to actually earn a living wage was always 6 months away, so yeah. Desperate, the listing was a ghost in the machine, a statistical error in the rental market. Spacious duplex, flat 27, motivated landlord. The rent was half of anything else I'd seen. I called, fully expecting it to be a scam or long gone. A man with a gravelly, rushed voice answered. "Still available. Can you see it today?" The landlord was a little too eager. He was a gaunt man, his suit hanging off him like a scarecrow's rags. He smelled of stale cigarettes and something else. Something metallic and vaguely sweet. He never met my eyes, just stared at a spot over my shoulder as he gave the tour. The whole building had this weird, coppery smell I couldn't place, but I brushed it off. Old pipes, maybe. The building was also silent. Not quiet. Silent. It had the oppressive hush of a library, but with none of the life. We walked up 3 flights of stairs, and I didn't see or hear a single other person. It was unnerving. The apartment, flat 27, was a duplex, just as advertised. It was dusty and the wallpaper was peeling, but it was huge. More space than I knew what to do with. I tried asking about the last tenant, why anyone would leave a place like this. The landlord just gave this jerky, unnatural shrug. "Moved on," he mumbled, already shoving a lease into my hands. "First and last month's rent. Keys are on the counter." He looked like he was escaping the apartment, not renting it. I ignored all of it. The smell, the silence, the twitchy landlord. I saw the space, the price, and my freedom from my parents' couch. I told myself I was just being paranoid. That is, until I found the move-out checklist on the kitchen counter. It was a single yellowed sheet of paper, typed on what looked like an ancient typewriter. It was a list of 8 rules. The first one was simple enough. Don't answer the door after 3 a.m. My blood ran cold, but I had no clue how much worse it was about to get. I tried to laugh it off, I really did. I crumpled the paper and tossed it toward the trash. A joke. Had to be a prank from the last tenant trying to spook the new guy. I left the crumpled ball on the floor and started moving in. The first few days were almost normal. The silence I'd found so creepy was actually a blessing after the noise of my family's house. I bought a cheap rug to cover a weird, dark stain on the living room floor. I scrubbed the kitchen until the coppery smell was replaced by lemon cleaner. I was actually building a home. I even tried being neighborly. I baked some mediocre cookies and knocked on the door of flat 28. No answer. I tried flat 26. Nothing. I left the cookies on their doormats like a pathetic peace offering. The next morning, they were still there, untouched. Later that week, I passed a woman in the hall. She was stick-thin and shuffled, her eyes locked on the floor. I gave her a friendly, "Hello." She flinched, pulled her coat tighter, and just scurried away. I figured she was just shy. In a building this cheap, you get all sorts. People who want to be left alone. I could respect that. The silence was getting less peaceful, though. More expectant. The first test came that Thursday, a week after I'd moved in. I was up late debugging some awful code and had fallen asleep at my desk. I woke up with a jolt to a sound. A conversation in the hallway. My phone screen glowed. 3:17 a.m. The voices were muffled, just murmurs. It sounded like a man and a woman. My first thought was irritation. Who has a chat in the hall in the middle of the night? I stumbled to the door, my hand on the deadbolt, ready to tell them off. And then I remembered. Rule number 1. Do not answer the door if you hear someone talking in the hall after 3 a.m. I froze. My hand flew back from the lock like it was red hot. The crumpled paper was still on the floor, a yellow eye staring up at me. This wasn't a joke. My heart started hammering. I listened again, really listened this time, and the voices sounded wrong. There was no rhythm, no natural cadence of speech. It was just sound, shaped like words, but hollow. Hey, open up. The voice was right at my door. A man's voice, but completely flat, emotionless. It wasn't a question. It was a command. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I backed away from the door. I just stood there in the middle of my living room, every muscle tight, barely breathing. The doorknob started to jiggle, softly at first, then harder. My mind was scrambling for a rational explanation. Drunk neighbor, a stupid prank. But the image of the landlord's haunted face, the dead silence, the untouched cookies, it all crashed together into one terrifying thought. This is real. I stood there for what felt like an hour, listening to that gentle, persistent rattling. The voices were gone. There was only the sound of the lock being tested. Then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. Silence. I didn't move until the first gray light of dawn started filtering through the window. Only then did I creep to the door and look through the peephole. The hallway was empty, pristine, and the cookies I'd left on the doormats days ago were gone. I slowly unlocked the door and opened it a crack. The air in the hall was cold and still, but it carried a faint, unmistakable scent. That coppery smell from the first day, but thicker now, heavier, like old blood. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I picked the crumpled list off the floor, smoothed it out, and read the second rule. Rule number 2. If you feel something in the guest room on the ground floor at night, ignore it. Calling it a guest room was generous. It was a small, boxy room on the first floor with a grimy window that looked out onto a brick wall. The only thing in it was a large, dark wood closet built into the wall. Its door was warped and didn't shut right, leaving a permanent dark sliver of an opening. I had no guests and no use for the room, so I'd kept the door to it shut. After the hallway incident, the whole apartment felt different. The space I wanted so badly now felt huge and menacing. Every creak, every groan of the pipes felt like a threat. I started sleeping with a lamp on. A couple of weeks went by. I fell into this paranoid routine. Home before dark, eat in silence, ears straining for any sound. I tried to ignore the faint scratching I'd started to hear from inside the walls, telling myself it was just mice. I read the list of rules every single morning, like some twisted prayer. The second rule was vaguer than the first and somehow scarier. If you feel something, how do you ignore a feeling? I found out on a Tuesday night. I was heading up the narrow staircase to my bedroom in the loft. As I passed the closed door to the guest room, I felt it. A sudden, intense drop in temperature, like walking through an invisible sheet of ice. The air got heavy, and the hair on my arms stood up. It was that primal gut punch feeling of being watched. My eyes were drawn to the bottom of the guest room door. I could see a line of pure blackness in the crack underneath. It wasn't a normal shadow. It was a thick, oily darkness that seemed to be pressing against the door, trying to get out. I could feel it. The presence. It was in there. My heart was pounding. My first instinct was to run up the stairs and lock myself in my bedroom. But morbid curiosity is a powerful, stupid thing. The rule said to ignore it. It didn't say not to look. My hand felt like it was moving on its own. I slowly turned the knob, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. I pushed the door open a few inches. The room was freezing, unnaturally cold, and the air was thick with the smell of dust and damp soil. The room was empty, just as I'd left it. Nothing there, except for the closet. The closet door, which I knew I'd left almost shut, was now wide open. And in the deepest part of the shadow, I saw them. Two tiny points of light. Faint, like distant stars, but they were there. They were low to the ground, too low to be a reflection. And as I watched, they blinked. It was a slow, deliberate, unhuman blink. The wrongness of it sent a shockwave of terror through me. Those were eyes. Something was in my closet, watching me. I couldn't see a body, just the crushing darkness and those two patient, watching eyes. I felt a pressure building in my head, a silent hum vibrating through my bones, as if the thing in the closet was inviting me in, daring me to get closer. I slammed the door so hard the frame shook and scrambled up the stairs, tripping over my own feet. I didn't stop until I was in my bedroom with the door locked, my back pressed against it, gasping. I hadn't just peeked. I had broken the spirit of the rule, if not the letter. Peeking was not ignoring. Sleep was a joke. All night, I pictured those eyes in the dark, and I could almost feel them even through the floor looking up at me. In the morning, I hesitated at the top of the stairs. Hunger finally won. I crept down, my whole body tensed, and forced myself to open the guest room door. The room felt normal. The temperature was fine. I walked over to the closet and, with a trembling hand, pulled the door open. It was empty. Just a dusty, vacant space. But on the wooden floor, right where the eyes would have been, were two long, deep scratches, as if something had been bracing itself there, waiting. Rule number 3. The previous owner never left. Do not discuss him with neighbors. This was the most cryptic one. How could the previous owner have never left? I was living here. And what neighbors? The shuffling woman I saw once? For weeks, I saw no one. The silence of the building was a suffocating presence. My world had shrunk to my apartment and my office. I was becoming a ghost in my own life. The paranoia was eating me alive. The scratching in the walls was more frequent, sounding less like mice and more like fingernails dragging on drywall. I was exhausted, living on a razor's edge. I just needed to know I wasn't going insane. I needed to talk to another human being. That's when I saw the guy from upstairs, leaving flat 29 directly above me. He was about my age, with a perpetually worried face and fidgety hands. He actually made eye contact, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he quickly looked away. This was my chance. "Hey!" I called out, my voice raspy. "Sorry to bother you." He stopped, instantly tense. "Yes?" "I'd just moved in downstairs. Flat 27. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "I know." "Right. I was just wondering." Weird question, but is the building always this quiet? He just stared at me, his eyes wide with something I couldn't place. Fear? Pity? Most people keep to themselves. He whispered. "It's better that way." He started to leave, but I couldn't let it go. The isolation was crushing me. "Look, I'm sorry, but my apartment is strange, and the landlord was weird. I was just hoping you could tell me about the guy who lived here before me. The landlord said he just moved on, but..." I trailed off. The change in the man was instant and horrifying. The color drained from his face. His fidgeting stopped. He went completely still, his eyes locked on mine with an expression of pure, gut-wrenching terror. He looked like he was staring at a dead man. "You shouldn't have asked that," he whispered, his voice trembling as he took a step back. "You can't talk about him, never. They don't like it." "They? Who are they?" I pressed, my own fear spiking. But he was already gone, practically running down the hall and taking the stairs 2 at a time. I stood there, my question hanging in the dead air. I'd done it again. I broke another rule. The rule wasn't about having a full conversation. It was about asking in the first place. The attempt was the crime. I didn't see the fidgety man again. Not the next day or the day after. At first, I figured he was just avoiding me. But after a week of not hearing a single footstep from the apartment I now knew was occupied, a new, colder dread settled in. His apartment had gone completely silent. The next Monday, a stack of mail was pushed through my mail slot. Bills, junk, and a letter for current resident. But stuck to it was another envelope, one meant for flat 29, for my neighbor. I picked it up, planning to slide it under his door, and glanced at the name. The world stopped. It was the same name on my lease agreement. The name of the man I had replaced. The previous owner of flat 27. He hadn't moved out. He had moved up. He never left. I dropped the letter like it was on fire. The man from flat 29 hadn't just fled from me in the hallway that day. He had fled back to his apartment, and something had happened to him. The rule wasn't a warning. It was an explanation. You couldn't discuss the previous owner because the building, the neighbors, the rules themselves enforced his silence. And now, they were enforcing the silence of the man upstairs. I never heard a sound from flat 29 again. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was full of what was missing. I spend my days writing code and my nights trying not to listen to the sounds this apartment makes. This is my attempt to figure out what's happening to me. If you've ever felt like you were living somewhere with secrets, if you know what it's like when the silence gets too loud, maybe subscribe. Maybe by sharing this, we can feel a little less alone in the dark. I have 4 rules left. Each one feels less like a guideline and more like a tombstone waiting for my name. The elevator I'm too scared to use after midnight. The crying I sometimes hear from the empty apartment above me. The warning not to talk to neighbors after dark. And the last, most terrifying rule, which hints that this list isn't finished. I'm not living in flat 27. I'm surviving it. The cheap rent was the bait and my desperation was the hook. Now I'm caught. I don't know who the previous owner really was, but I think I'm starting to understand what happened to him. He didn't follow the rules. And in this building, the rules are everything. I swear the walls shift when I'm not looking. Doors lead to places they shouldn't. Time seems to bend. I'm writing this as a record, a warning. I think the 8th rule is the key. The rules change. A new one appears if broken. I've broken, or at least bent, 3 of them. Every morning I check the list on the counter, my heart in my throat, terrified I'll find a 9th rule waiting. One written just for me. Leaving isn't an option. I know that in my bones. The contract I signed wasn't with the landlord, it was with the building. And this house doesn't let its tenants go.